Have you ever sat in silence, perhaps during prayer or just a quiet moment in your room, and felt like something is missing, as if there is a piece of the puzzle of God that doesn't quite fit with what you've been told? What if I told you that for centuries, everything we thought we knew about divine grace was incomplete, not because the Bible is wrong, but because we were only given half the story? Deep beneath the scorching sands of the Egyptian desert, history held its breath for nearly 2,000 years, and sacred texts written by those who walked beside Jesus were intentionally buried and silenced. We call them the Lost Gospels, and among these fragile, ancient papyrus scrolls, one voice rises above the rest, a voice that history tried to erase, the voice of Mary Magdalene. Imagine a spiritual awakening that doesn't rely on rigid rules, stone temples, or inherited guilt, but on ancient secrets that whisper freedom directly to your heart. Welcome to Living Hope, where today we are going to unearth the mystery of the Gospel of Mary, asking the hard question of whether these forbidden writings could hold the answer to the anxiety and emptiness so many of us feel in the modern world. Stay with me until the very end, because what we uncover today won't just change how you see history, it might just transform the very architecture of your soul. To truly understand this secret, we have to be brave enough to look at history with open eyes and realize that we often assume the early Christian faith was a solid, uniform block identical to what we see in churches today. But the reality of the first believers was much messier and more beautiful. It was a vibrant mosaic of ideas, passionate debates, and different ways of understanding the message of Jesus. However, as the institution grew, it sought order. Decisions were made, politics came into play, and certain voices were chosen for the official canon while others were silenced, with deep mystical teachings labeled as dangerous heresies and condemned to fire or oblivion. But the earth has a memory and protects the truth. And in 1945, near the cliffs of Nag Hammadi in Egypt, peasants digging for fertilizer struck something hard, finding a sealed clay jar buried by ancient monks to protect it from destruction. Inside, there was no gold or jewels, only leather-bound books, the Gnostic texts. And among these treasures, a text emerged that forces us to rethink everything. A gospel where Mary Magdalene isn't a secondary character or the penitent sinner we've been told about, but a spiritual protagonist, a teacher, and someone the Savior trusted with secrets about the mind and the soul that he didn't even share with the male apostles. When we dive into these writings, we enter the fascinating world of Christian Gnosticism, and unlike the hierarchy that placed a priest between you and the divine, they sought gnosis, which isn't just intellectual book knowledge, but direct experiential knowing of God, believing that salvation didn't come from blind faith or external rituals, but from waking up and igniting a divine spark that already lives inside you. So, I want you to set aside the image of the woman weeping at the foot of the cross for a moment, because in the Gospel of Mary, she is called the Apostle to the Apostles, the beloved disciple whose mind was in tune with Christ. There is a breathtaking scene in the text where Jesus has departed and the male disciples are sitting there weeping, terrified of the future and afraid the Romans or religious leaders will kill them next. But in the midst of that fear, the one who stands up to give them strength isn't Peter, the rock, it is Mary. She stands with stunning spiritual authority, embraces them with her words, and says, "Do not weep, and do not grieve, nor be irresolute. For his grace will be entirely with you and will protect you." In these lost Gospels, she doesn't ask for permission to speak, nor feel inferior. She knows because she has experienced divine grace internally and understands that the Savior hasn't left them orphans, but has left the power within their own hearts. Here is where it gets incredibly relevant for us today, as the Gospel of Mary details the journey of the soul, but instead of describing a final judgment with a punishing God on a throne, it describes an internal battle where the soul must ascend past powers that try to trap it in darkness, powers with names we recognize all too well, like anger, desire, ignorance, and greed. The text teaches us that the soul triumphs and reaches God not because it obeyed a rule out of fear, but because it achieved inner silence and self-knowledge, with Mary declaring that desire has been destroyed, ignorance has died. From this hour on, I attain to the rest of the time in silence. This redefines divine grace for us, showing it is not a random gift you hope to receive from the outside, but a dormant force already inside you waiting to be released, reminding us that we are not separated from God by a chasm of sin, but are beings of light who, distracted by the noise of the material world, have simply forgotten where we came from. Now brace yourself, because the text includes a very human moment of tension that explains exactly why these books were hidden. Peter, hearing Mary speak with such wisdom about her visions, gets upset, feels threatened, and questions her legitimacy in front of the group, unable to believe the Savior would teach deep secrets to a woman and not to the men. That is when Levi, another apostle, stands up and delivers a line that should echo in every church today. Peter, you have always been hot-tempered. Now I see you contending against the woman like the adversaries. But if the Savior made her worthy, who are you indeed to reject her? Surely the Savior knows her very well. That is why he loved her more than us. Friends, this is powerful because it tells us that spiritual dignity does not come from your title or your gender. It comes from the purity of your heart and your capacity to love. By reclaiming Mary Magdalene as a teacher and a guide, we recover the mystical balance that is often missing in our faith, realizing that early Christianity was diverse, which gives us permission today to have our own questions, our own doubts, and our own direct connection with the Creator. So, let me look you in the eye and ask, what does this change for you today, in your routine and in your struggles? You don't have to view the Bible and the Gnostic texts as enemies, but rather view them as pieces of a sacred puzzle that help you deepen the mystery, teaching us that the real spiritual battle is in the mind, and the ultimate victory is the peace of the soul. The gift of these lost Gospels is empowerment, inviting us to stop being passive spectators and take responsibility for our spiritual lives. If you feel empty, anxious, or without purpose, remember you have that divine spark within you. That ember never goes out, and grace is simply the act of fanning that flame. Jesus himself said in the Gospel of Thomas, another text found in that same jar at Nag Hammadi, "Be passers-by." Meaning, be in the world, but don't let it consume you. Live here, but remember your home is the light. The veil of the temple was torn a long time ago, and there are no barriers between your soul and God except the mental walls we build ourselves. So I want to invite you from the bottom of my heart to be part of this ancient conversation and ask yourself what it really means that God inhabits your interior and not just a building. Let me know in the comments which part of these secrets resonated most with you. Was it Levi's defense, the soul's journey past fear, or Mary's calm authority? Here at Living Hope, we believe your journey is sacred, and may that grace, that living, breathing presence of God within you, guide your steps, clear your mind, and strengthen your heart this week. Walk in light and keep the faith.